Hello, I'm Mike Boyle. I'm VP of Business Units here at GlobalSign.
Hello, I'm Rahul Pawar, CEO and founder of RedSift.
Today we'll each be answering some questions and unpacking recent developments around email security and the impact of that on business trust. Let's start by discussing how you came into the tech space, how it's changed over the years. Yeah, if you give your perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in technology for about 26 years at this point in time.
Wow.
And needless to say, a lot has changed over that period of time. I think it's become more and more apparent that technology is capable of tremendous change in society. And we've all witnessed it ourselves. But the counterpoint to that is the challenges that organizations face when it comes to things like brand trust, organizational integrity, and this hostile landscape that they find themselves facing when they're out on the internet in 2026. So Mike, you've been in the industry for a really long time too. What have been the sort of changes that you've seen over this period of time in technology?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I've been in this industry for about 21 years now. I think the biggest change has been how email has evolved. Email started with no security when it was way back in the day in the 70s, early 80s. And it wasn't until sort of the early 90s that we started to see security controls like a PGP and SMIME. Then we start to move on to spam filtering, SPF and so on. So I think we're arriving now, some sort of 30, 40, 50 years later into a space where people still using email, still the most prevalent use of communication, and the identity assurance piece, as well as the sort of security side, is helping to evolve into this business trust, this identity verification, identity verified and identity backed trust. So it's exciting times. We often talk about organizations still struggling with the fundamentals. So from your perspective, why is getting the basics right still such a challenge? And where does something like DMARC fit into that?
Sure. So I think getting the basics right is something that everyone at a superficial level would agree is something organizations need to do. However, we have found that organizations are so deep firefighting with the security challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis that it's quite difficult for them to allocate the resource and the priority towards doing things that are more proactive. Quite often, because they haven't done the basics to begin with, their SOCs are overwhelmed with noise and incidents and phishing reports and all these sorts of things, which they're basically just chasing their tail with. So organizations sort of need to take a bit of a step back and say, what are the fundamental security protocols? What are the basic operations we need to put in place? Try and improve that signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
If they're able to put some of these things in place, it's not a magic bullet, certainly, but it will reduce the number of incidents that they have to deal with on a regular basis. Yeah. And I think organizations are at different levels of their maturity cycle on this. And like you mentioned, education is a big challenge. So as we get to things like, DMARC, as we get to the VMC and the CMC, these are new things that, even people who are fairly seasoned when it comes to network and information security architecture may have heard of, but they don't really know how they do it, what the benefit is. So, I think education is one of the big challenges. And the other challenge that we have also seen is that some of these can be a little bit complex. If you're a small organization with very simple infrastructure, then implementing some of these might not be that challenging. But if you're operating at global scale, like some of our customers are, it becomes a lot more difficult. And there is an impact of getting these things wrong. If you don't do them correctly, then you're going to have some sort of business continuity challenge. And organizations are rightfully cautious about the risk associated with implementing these technologies incorrectly. So I think every organization is unique, and every organization will have different things that they're finding challenging. And we think we've seen them all, different sizes of organizations operating in different kinds of industries, some regulated, some not regulated. But it is clear that the flow of technology and the flow of industry is towards proactive security. It's towards getting the fundamentals right, implementing these technologies that are actually very useful for the fabric of the internet. I mean, we talk about making the internet a fundamentally safer place, and all of these technologies are really part of that solution.
From these things, the technology, but you've also got the reality of adoption. I think sometimes it's bypassed. Businesses still got to operate. They still have to be able to apply or make available the resources to embed these things, right? So even if they buy into it, there's still a bit of a time lag. Some businesses react where they're thinking about cost outlay. It's an all thing as businesses run. But these types of services that Redsift and GlobalSign provide is like it helps them achieve a lower total cost of ownership. It really does address more than just what they think is on the table in terms of email security or email trust.
Absolutely. So Mike, you talked about different challenges and maybe how things have changed over the last 10, 15 years. What have you seen more recently? Obviously, I don't think we can do a video in 2026 talking about AI. So, when we talk about things like AI, where do you see that being helpful for the kinds of challenges we just talked about?
AI has changed the game completely in the attack versus defense. So I think people focus a lot more on defense in that term, and in order for them to understand how to use AI effectively in defense, they've got to understand what's coming at them from the attack side. So the most profound thing, the impact of AI in terms of the attack is it's the turnaround time. Phishing attacks used to take hours for somebody to write a phishing email, and now that's hours into seconds. Now it takes seconds to do, and you talk about, the actual from spear phishing, gathering, collating data, that they used to take days. Now it takes minutes. AI has completely changed that. And then into the sort of phishing campaigns, these sort of email attack verticals that we see, campaigns, they used to be long. This stuff used to be done manually, and now it's all done. It can all be done and all packaged and be very effective. It's sent out a few minutes or even, as much as an hour, something that used to take weeks. So complete game changer. On the positive side, it helps people understand. You can do like SOC analysis, you can do, phishing detection, you can do many different things with AI. And AI is actually going to help businesses, if you think it's a bit like AI versus AI, right? But even AI can attack AI if in that sort of respects. The beauty of AI is it's continuously learning. And, it's embedded in tools and the approach that people take with it. AI is certainly going to help people react quicker and be able to do their analysis quicker in the same way the attacks are coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of sympathy for organizations that have to protect themselves from what is a deluge of more automated attacks, because cybersecurity is a sort of strange place where, attacker has to be right once, the defender has to be right all the time.
Absolutely that.
So you have this inherent asymmetry in the way attacks are carried out. And to your point, we're certainly seeing this rise of heavy personalization at industrialized scale, powered by models that are specifically built to do these types of tasks. We've already seen that many of the attacks, looking at a recent attack and takeover of a water utility, where essentially off-the-shelf AI tools were used to do a lot of reconnaissance on a continuous basis in a way that would have required specialist resources and a lot of time for a bad actor to do, just a couple of years ago. So this is the reality. And then if we then say that we're going to only have humans on the other side dealing with the deluge of attacks that AI is enabling, we can see that's inherently a losing game. So being able to use AI as part of the solution is clearly very important to get the same kind of knowledge industrialization that the bad actors are already starting to benefit from.
This is one of the primary reasons why identity is in trust is so valuable. Assassination comes from, the so-called black box that nobody sees where it's coming from or how it's getting there, but it's identityless. So the more prevalent identity is, the easier it becomes to identify those risks at source. So we're hearing a lot about BIMI and brand visibility in the inbox. So Rahul, how are you seeing specifications like BIMI actually helping organizations, helping them overcome those types of challenges?
So BIMI is strictly built on top of DMARC. And just to sort of break it down, DMARC's a very important fundamental technology for email security that's much better understood today than it was perhaps 8 years ago when we first started deploying these technologies for our customers. It essentially prevents trivial impersonation. So if you own a domain and you use that domain to send email and you're not doing DMARC, you are open to fairly trivial impersonation by a bad actor who will see that your domain is not protected in this way, and then can launch attacks against your supply chain, your customers, your employees, pretty much anyone in your network, which they can now surveil quite easily and industrially to impersonate you. If you deploy DMARC correctly, you can prevent this from happening. And it's great because it doesn't involve human beings. We're talking about basically doing proactive technology that does not require our people, your employees, your supply chain, to actually be very aware of what's going on. The technology takes care of this type of attack, and DMARC is one of those protocols that will do it. Now, the challenge with DMARC has always been that it's kind of invisible. When you're doing it correctly, it just stops stuff at a protocol level, and BIMI makes it visible to end users. And what BIMI does is it's an open standard that's been ratified across the internet. That means that inbox providers, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Yahoos of the world, will be BIMI aware, and they'll understand what this is about. And if you produce authentic email that's DMARC compliant, you can present your brand inside the email in a predictable way. On something like a Google or an Apple inbox, you will actually get a little verified tick that is unspoofable, and that gives the recipient, whoever they might be, some level of authenticity. They know that this email, if it's coming from their bank, the healthcare provider, potentially the government, this tick gives them some assurance that this genuinely came from them. We know that traditionally this has always been a bit of a challenge for organizations that are using email for all sorts of very important transactional information. It's a great channel, right? You can use it to talk to anyone on the internet. But without strong authenticity, you're limited in what you can actually put in that email and what you should put in that email. So BIMI is trying to address this gap and say, okay, we've actually got strong protocols now that allow us to prevent this type of trivial impersonation. And let's now use all of the great infrastructure that already exists in the land of PKI and extended validation to basically make that visible to the end user and give them a visual representation and a strong authentication signal that the communication that they are interacting with genuinely came from the organization they thought they're interacting with.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. I think you're right. That's certainly where BIMI is helping push that, get people to be aware that there is this trust element. It is visible, and it doesn't just have to again be guesswork.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a technologist, I believe strongly that we should be making the lives of our customers, employees, supply chain easier, not more complicated. So when the technology provides first-class solutions to prevent these types of impersonations from happening, we should certainly be doing our best to ensure that everyone has access to these technologies and can deploy them across their own infrastructure. So talking about this specific topic, beyond the standards and the protocols that we've talked about, from your perspective, Mike, what sort of things should organizations be thinking about more broadly when it comes to keeping themselves secure?
Well, I think kind of we touched on it in this one area. You mentioned supply chain. Supply chain is one of the biggest sort of points of attack. Consumer trust and sort of business to business trust is very important. In essence, you're proving who you are. And that's the thing. If you adopt DMARC, and BIMI, then you have this sort of verified business identity. You've got brand trust applied. If we think broader beyond just thinking about the visibility to customers, we're thinking about the visibility of ourselves as a business. So we're talking then not just being able to affect the supply chain by being suppliers to others. It's also that sort of trust, digital trust model internally. The conforming to say, we can prove who we are. We can now stand at a gold standard and say to the outside world, we take, security seriously, but we take trust seriously.
Absolutely. And I think there's certainly a role to be played in regulation. We've seen that now that these protocols are well established and adopted by most of the internet in some meaningful way, we've started to see organizations like governments, reach out and say, okay, all of our own infrastructure needs to be compliant with this sort of minimum level of cybersecurity. But more importantly, all the people that we meaningfully interact with. So our supply chain needs to be meaningfully adopting these technologies because, of course, having worked in this industry for a long time, we know that when this happens at scale, you get the network effects of cybersecurity in a way that is very difficult to do if you're just putting boxes at the edge of your network. And most of the modern attacks that we see have all of these touch points and have all of these interaction points. That means it's not just about what happens in this one silo. It's about how all of these things are connected together in a way that might even be across your supply chain boundary. They might be compromising your suppliers or using the trust that you have in your suppliers to do things in your network that you really did not anticipate directly. So having a broad level of compliance with best practices for modern cybersecurity just reduces that attack surface and reduces the amount of noise that you have to deal with on a daily basis.
I mean, you mentioned there, it's an incredible point. Security is run in silo. It is, we see it so often, in our interactions, and taking brand security and the digital security awareness as a sort of standard within a business that everything else can fall into, because attacks don't come through silos. They come through multiple silos. I think as we look forward into the marketplace and, where services like DMARC and services related to DMARC, the adoption of BIMI and wider services as well, it's going to help businesses adopt genuine digital trust, because it is about their brand protection. No one wants to lose data and then have to face a GDPR fine or some other regulatory impact, and certainly the sort of brand damage that does is incredible, and this is what business is about, right? You spend all the time, effort, blood, sweat and tears building a brand only for some outside thing to come in and destroy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about any real attack is, it's probably going to have some email component to it. It's probably going to have some web component to it. There's probably going to be some DNS abuse. There's definitely going to be some PKI abuse in one way or the other. And, traditionally, these are very sort of functional units inside an organization. But from an attacker's perspective, it's all the things that they need to do in order to launch a successful attack. And wherever you're weakest, especially if you're weaker than your peers, you're more likely to be the organization that gets attacked via the vector that is most available to the attackers.
And so how would you characterize the relationship between Redshift and GMO GlobalSign and how it supports organizations to actually put this into practice?
Absolutely. So I think we're very excited to be working with GMO GlobalSign on this because, as we just mentioned, the attackers don't really care about how our silos are organized internally. And with our expertise in email security and DNS hygiene combined with your expertise in PKI and issuing things like BMCs and CMCs as the technology matures, we can clearly offer a more complete solution for any one of our mutual customers who basically need this problem solved end to end. All of these technologies work together in a way to provide a strong, modern, standards-based, proactive security posture for our mutual customers. And if we're able to integrate our technologies, ensure that we are seamlessly able to provide that capability for organizations that are ready to adopt, then clearly we are working effectively to simplify this, make it more accessible, educate the market, and ultimately help organizations present a much more modern, proactive, standards-based security posture out into the internet.
One of the beauties of this is how it's kind of out of the box. It's really important to make things available that can be adopted quickly. So as much as the great stuff when in our combined services will really help them attain that security posture that they need to take, the adoptability is very seamless and very easy too. I think people still need to understand the importance of DMARC, and that's because that's really important. I mean, BIMI obviously in the layer on top, but DMARC is the most important thing. Positioning MARC certificates from our perspective is helping people take DMARC more seriously, and helping them understand how to apply it. And then, the technology side through Sift, and that sort of continuous monitoring, the continuous availability. It's not a one-time thing, is it? You don't just do it, walk away. As in, you don't just do it and leave. You can do it and know that it will continue to protect you.
Yeah, absolutely. It also opens up the aperture on this a little bit, because there are now multiple stakeholders in an organization that can see the benefits. We've had examples where organizations, take DMARC seriously, but maybe haven't had the time and budget for it. Whereas now that we have, VMCs and CMCs, and marketing departments can, for example, look at this and say, hey, this could help me improve my conversion rates or my open rates on email. And suddenly the security team gets budget from their partners in the marketing part of the business to help and implement these very necessary security protocols. It allows many more stakeholders to get excited about what technology can do, not just for the bottom line, but also potentially for the top line of a business. If you're a direct-to-consumer brand or you have like a big B2C presence, these are exactly the sort of things that marketing teams get very excited about. And it's rare that you can get, marketing and security aligned around a similar objective. So it's great that, we have this partnership. It's great that we're opening up the aperture and helping organizations understand the benefit of these technologies more broadly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's still at this early stage, it's still a little bit the unknowns of what it does internally, because obviously the outward facing thing, the positioning of brand trust and making customers feel comfortable that the organization they're going to interact with is doing things in the right way and protecting them. But all the like we mentioned, all the supply chain thing, we've got to mention the finance impact within a business. One of the normal things when it comes to social engineering, spear phishing, we've seen how many instances of somebody imitating the CFO and saying, make this transaction, it's urgent and whatever else. Well, that sort of trust element that comes from DMARC, comes from BIMI and the MARC certificates as well, can have the same impact internally as it can externally. Sometimes maybe is bypassed, So I think as this industry develops, as the sort of technology develops as well, it's going to become a lot broader. It's going to become a lot more helpful, and it's certainly going to expand beyond what it currently is into other areas of digital trust. So it's very exciting.
It's foundational technology.
To understand how we unpack sort of email trust, how it's evolving, why it's become a crucial part. And I think everybody understands because everybody uses email, right? But I don't think sometimes they look at the actual dynamics of what's going on and the risks sometimes. So yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Wonderful, Mike. Thank you for having me.
No problem.